All right. You guys want to start? Hi, Damien. Okay. Okay, so you guys can sit back there, so I gotta stand way up here. Move to you, yeah. Huh? Are you guys like this in school too? So my name's Dan Kwasnowski. I'm the planning director for Onondaga County. I have a couple staff here. We have our intern, Ellison.
Hello.
And we have, of course, you all know Megan Costa. Most of you probably know Megan. She's my assistant director of county planning. June has been a busy month for me, but we really wanted to get out and present this plan, especially the town supervisors, town boards, planning boards, and other municipal boards before the public hearing on July 5th. And the reason for that is because we started with you guys and we wanted to make sure that we kind of wrapped up with you guys and showed you what we came up with. If you've been to our consortium, you know that our countywide plan is based on 5 themes. And what we've done at the end, towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to show what we've done to try to show how you can integrate those themes, how they're dependent on each other. But we're really, dependent on you guys, right? Because the county can do certain things, towns can do certain things, villages can do other certain things. So we all got to kind of work together to make this county the place that we want it to be now and in the future, right? For the people that live here and the people that we want to move here. Obviously, up in this part of the county, there's been a lot of discussions, I'm sure. I know, Damien and Bob have been, with the Micron announcement, there's been a lot of excitement. But one of the things that I've learned working with the housing consultant that we're bringing on that just finished a study in the city, as he said, 9,000 jobs is great, but we still have 90,000 jobs here, and we still have people who live here, and we still have housing needs, and so you can't really lose sight of that too. So that's kind of where we came from with this plan. Like, we wanted to be prepared for anything, and we wanted you to be prepared for anything. But I'm going to kind of dig into the presentation here. Is anybody, I know you probably haven't seen the presentation on the 5 things of the plan, but I'm going to go through those as quickly as I can, because I know a lot of you have heard that before, and we're going to kind of get into the end of the plan and the new stuff. Okay, does that sound good? And then we'll have a conversation, ask questions, and see where it goes. But Ryan couldn't make it today, so we should be wrapped up in probably about an hour. That's the way they've been going. This is my 4th one this week. Not that Ryan talks a lot, but it's just one less thing on the agenda. So I'm going to get started. So Plan Onondaga. The last countywide plan was adopted about 28 years ago, something like that, depending on how you count it. We haven't had one since, and I think we definitely do need one. And I'm really excited that through this process and working with town supervisors and with the Micron announcement, we've got a lot of towns very interested in doing their own comp plan or updating it. We'll talk about how we're helping with that process as well. But I think it's really important to tell people, who you are, what you value, what your people value, and what direction you want to go in. I think it's really important as a communication tool for within the county, so that we all are on the same page. We can all kind of say, well, how does this fit in? It doesn't mean you can't do things different from this. This plan isn't exclusive of other things going on in your towns. It's just that this is from the county view. This is what we see as a need, and these are the types of things that we think we need to start working towards or continue working towards. And it's mostly continue. So one of the first things we did was we started with how we're going to engage the public. So I used to be a town planner, and when you have an issue in the town, whether it's solar panels or a new subdivision or whatever it is, it's not really hard to get a lot of attention from people, okay? But when you start talking about things at the county level, we found that it can be really difficult for people to wrap their heads around multiple municipalities or a whole corridor of a highway or whatever it is. So we started with, what do you like about Onondaga County? And Onondaga County would be better if. And we got a really great response. We did a lot of pop-up meetings at festivals like Apple Fest or wherever it was. And we just asked people to fill out these cards, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of these cards. And so we got a lot of really good feedback that's really taking what they, as an individual, see as a need in their community or in their county, and then kind of saying, well, how does that fit at the county level, right? Or what kind of resources do we need to bring to towns and villages in the city to make sure that they know that this is something that people desire, and what kind of tools can they use to fulfill those desires and needs. But one of the things that we also realized was, because it was difficult for people to think at the county level, one of our principles really needs to be community-based planning. So any plans that we fund, any plans that we're going to do ourselves, we're really going to commit and double down on making sure the community's engaged making sure that they're informed and making sure that they're participating in the process of that plan. So that's one of our guiding principles. Quality of life is the other one. You know, we want to make sure that whatever we're doing with these things is going to commit to a higher quality of life for everybody, right? And then economic development, you know, that is another thing. So these 5 dots in the middle are themes I'm going to talk about in a minute, but we relate them all to economic development, quality of life, and how can we better engage the community around these. So it's the themes again. So our 5 themes are housing and neighborhoods, strong centers, agriculture, greenways and blueways, and community mobility. And then for each one, we came up with like a vision statement or a purpose statement for that theme. So like strong, I'm just gonna read one of them. Strong centers are walkable, people-oriented places with a mix of jobs, housing, shopping, dining culture, public spaces, entertainment, transportation, and services. So that kind of defines what we're talking about for each one of these themes. And then a lot of the questions that we've gotten so far are, what role can the county play, or what role does the county play? And so we have a whole section in the plan that kind of describes this is what counties can do. These are the things we can do. You know, Supervisor Wicks and I were talking beforehand about Route 31 corridor, right? And I've talked with Supervisor Ulatowski about that. We sit on the Transportation Council, right? So we have 2 votes on that council. That's the council that controls all the federal money that comes in for highways. So we have the ability, and we've recently written a big federal highway administration grant just through my county department, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So we have that ability to kind of go to the state, to go to the feds, and get those resources that everybody agrees that we need to really look at this thing. And so if we know that that's something you're interested in doing, then we can go get those resources and come back to you and work with you to figure out what we all want to do. We can establish policy at the county level. We can market the county. OSIDA, our IDA, is our neighbor in our new building at the Carnegie building downtown. And we've been working with them a lot more lately about how can we work together and how can we market the community, not only to prospective employers, but also to people that work here that we want to attract to live here. And building capacity, bringing you guys the resources you need, whether it's a grant to hire a consultant, or giving our own technical advice, whether it's Don Jordan providing a map for you, whatever it is, building your capacity so you guys can do more locally is a big thing. And we can advocate too. If we know what you want and we're talking to the state or we're talking to Schumer's office, we can make sure, hey, we've been working with the towns and villages, we know what they want, this is what the direction they want to go in, and we need resources to make that happen. And then of course we can invest, right? We're putting a huge investment into our sewage treatment facilities countywide. We're consolidating a lot of those sewer districts. I think we did we do that up here yet?
Yeah.
Yep. So there's a lot of different ways that we can invest in our infrastructure or push people to invest in their infrastructure, right? The state or the feds or whoever it is. All right, so this is a new section, and this is a little techy, but I'm just gonna run through this quick because I think it's a really interesting chapter to read. And this is what we call a framework for competitiveness. And this was an idea that we had kind of from the very beginning, and we didn't really know where we were gonna go with it, but we had a wonderful consultant, Peter Fairweather, that he's a data guy, right? So he knew how to bring in some of these big data concepts and compare us to other places. And what we do is, in this chapter, is we compare Onondaga County to other counties in upstate New York. Just to give us an idea of like how do we compare? Because we kind of look at our problem, we look at our numbers, and we think, oh, geez, what are we going to do about that? But then if we look at other counties, we're, oh, well, we're not the only ones. This isn't just us. It's not something we're doing wrong. This is something that is affecting everybody. So how are they dealing with it? What are they doing to deal with it? What are we doing to deal with it? How can we learn from each other? And how do we compare to these other counties, and how can we compete with them, honestly, for jobs or for people? So these, the blue, green, and yellow, the blue is investments in people, the green is economic collaboration, and the yellow is strong centers. And this line tells us, if we're at this line, then we're even with everybody else. If we're above it, we're exceeding everybody else. And if we're below it, that's where we're kind of falling short. So you can see investments in people, this might be workforce development, things like that, education. This is where it shows a need, like we need to do a little bit more here to be even with everybody else. And you can, kind of dig into it. You can spend a lot of time in this chapter digging around. Economic collaboration, working together, right? Working with other places, other people that can really further our goals. We need to do a little bit more collaborating with people. Strong centers, which I'm going to talk quite a bit about, which is a real strong focus, one of the strongest themes in this plan. We do really good at that. We've got a lot of villages. We've got Baldwinsville, here, and Van Buren and Lysander. I live in the village of Marcellus. Ken's out in Elbridge. It's got 2 villages. I mean, we do villages really well. We have really nice villages. And one of the things I've been telling people this week is, if you go out west, I was recently out in St. George, Utah, and Salt Lake City. They're trying to create villages like we have in their development that they already have. And it's hard for them to do that. We have those bones here, right? We've got the beautiful downtown in Syracuse. Whether you like cities or not, it's a beautiful downtown. It's probably one of the nicest downtowns in upstate New York. That we probably take for granted, right? But it is. And so we're really good at creating strong centers. But up here in the north side, I've talked a lot with Supervisor Wieltowski, we need more. We need more strong centers, because these are the places where people gather. It's where they hold community events. It's where you go out for a beer with your friends, like whatever it is, whether it's a hamlet or a town center or downtown Syracuse or like my village of Marcellus. That's one of the things, that's one of the strongest lags in our market nationally, is having a walkable center where you have offices, you have apartments, you have restaurants, you have, whatever entertainment, whatever it is. The Village of Skinny House was at our meeting yesterday in Marcellus. They have a beautiful, strong center with a lot of tourism. It helps strengthen that. Lake, you've got a lot of lakefront and a lot of riverfront up here. You've got a lot of opportunity for some, waterfront strong centers up here. So we're really good at creating those, so we just got to take what we already know and just apply it in different places and make it happen, right? Okay, and then this map just shows kind of where the comparative counties are and the rest of the country. So we looked at someplace like, I was picking on Duluth, Minnesota, because although they're a smaller city, they're a college town, they're on a lake, and they're way up north, and they have almost the same climate as we do, but they were listed as one of the best places to live in Outside Magazine. So why were they listed as one of the best places to live in Outside Magazine and we weren't, right? And Ithaca has been on that list too. So what are they doing that we could do here, that we could do some of here in our own way? We don't have to replicate exactly what they're doing, but what are they doing? What are they offering to people that are getting them on those lists that are making them a great place to live nationally? And then here's like a kind of a breakdown of how some of the numbers look, and there's more factors here, but this one's poverty rate. So in Onondaga County, our poverty rate is about 14.1%. But we talk about poverty a lot. It's an initiative of the county executive to fight poverty. We're talking about it especially in the city of Syracuse. Peer counties in upstate New York is 13.7. So it's 0.4% different. So what that tells us is that we're not that different from other counties, metropolitan counties in upstate New York, right? And then nationally, the poverty rate is 11.9%. So we're a little bit higher than the national rate, but we're not that much higher. And what that tells us, like I said, we're not the only ones with a problem. We're probably not going to be the ones to solve it, but we can work together with other communities to figure out what can we be doing better to address it, and what are the causes of it. What does it really mean to have a poverty rate that high? Because I know, as you get older, but my parents were, affluent, middle class people, but by the time she got towards the end of life, if she had gone into a nursing home, she would have been considered poor, right? Because she didn't need it. So how much of that factors in? And if you dig into that, maybe you can start to understand what that rate means, and start to think about it in context of your own county and in context of other places. All right, so these are the themes. Sorry, my mouth is really. So strong centers I've already talked about a little bit, and the green wording over here is kind of what our initiatives are in a general sense. Support and enhance existing is a big one, right? When we have good, strong centers, let's keep them going. Create new centers at all scales, whether it's a small hamlet or whether it's a new town center with 1,000 people, whatever it is. Provide the tools and resources and partnerships for the development of strategic new centers. Incorporate multimodal options as a central element. So make sure that, if you're going to have higher density in certain places, make sure they have more than one way to get in and out of there. Invest in public places and spaces within existing and new centers. This is a big one. And this is one, actually, where's Karen? Karen and I were talking about a little while ago with new development. One of the things is like they put the buildings on there and they put the streets, and then it's like, well, what kind of place is it going to be? You know, well, if you're going to do a new town center, like what kind of public art are you going to have? Like what kind of space is it going to? How welcoming is it going to be? How interesting is it going to be there, right? My wife and I are going to. We haven't been there in a long time. We're going to Manhattan this weekend. It's a little getaway. And I'm really excited just to walk around the neighborhoods and just see what they do to enliven the spaces and to make them interesting. We just finished a waterfront plan, or we're finishing a waterfront plan in the city, in the lakefront area, right in Inner Harbor. Everybody talks about how it's, waterfront opportunity and whatever, but when you go there, I wish it wasn't on camera. I'll tell you a story. But my wife said, well, let's just say, it needs a little work to make it, like the Iron Pier development is great, Franklin Square development is great, but in between there and kind of around there, like there's not much else to go on, right? It's just kind of a blank slate, which is great. It's a great opportunity, but let's make it someplace that's really interesting. And you can do the same thing in your towns and villages. Our Main Street program speaks to this. All the work that Marty Skane's people are doing with the Main Street grants, and whether it's public art or improving the sidewalk or improving the streetscape or fixing up a building, those are all the kind of lend of that character in place. And one of the things that we have, especially in our existing centers, is a lot of historic structures, and that lends to a lot of character, right? All right, so then one of the ways we try to figure out, what makes us, how do we see these strong centers in our landscape? How do we discover where they are that we didn't think that they were, or how do we measure it? So we came up, same guy, or data guy, came up with a way of describing the concept of vibrancy, a vibrant community. And so these, you can see Baldwinsville here, pops out. Oh, look at that. I didn't know I could do that. Oh, this is going to mess me up. All right, so Megan knows how mad I would be if somebody touched my screens. I guess it's intentional. All right, so Baldwin, you can see it's dark in the middle, it's light around. So this took, and then you can see downtown Syracuse here, it's real dark in the middle. So what this did was it took a bunch of factors, like services and restaurants and retail and whatever it was, and residential, and kind of said, well, where are they? How close together are they? And then this whole analysis thing. So these kind of popped on the map, and what this told us was, there's places like this, we're not even sure what it is, but we know that there's something going on there. And then we know downtown is strong, but then when we go out towards Camillus along Genesee Street, you can see the village here, but then there's like these little nodes along the way that are developing with more and more vibrancy as they infill in the parking lots and they start doing things out there. All of a sudden they start to pop. But can I move it?
Yes.
But then when you get down to the southern part, when I'm looking at like Route 20, like I know in Pompey, which is here, like Pompey Hills, right? I know that there's a hamlet there, but why didn't that show up? My friend lives like right next to that hamlet. So, I know they have the academy, they have pancake breakfast there, they have an ice cream stand, but why didn't that, and they have, of course, the Pompey Mall. I can't talk about Pompey, I'm talking about the Pompey Mall, right? But why didn't that come up? Why didn't that show up, right? So now we got to ask questions. Now as planners, we can start asking questions like, well, what? And I know like Apulia is a very strong center in the town of Fabius. Why didn't they show up so much? Why did the Village of Marcellus show up, but it's not dark like the Village of Skaneateles? Because we don't have as much as Skaneateles, even though we're about the same size village, right? So we can start to look at this and say, well, why didn't this one show up? And what do we got to do to make it show up? Why did the other one show up? And what can we do to either help them get better or help them continue to be great, right? So this is kind of one of those data analysis things that we use as a tool. So now is that going to work? Oh my God, I can teach little dog tricks. All right. So this goes back about 15 years, and this was a study by Urban 3, and this is a 3D model of value per acre. So it's basically the assessed value per acre. And you can see, mixed use downtown Syracuse is kind of off the charts, right? And then these little nodes that align, not surprising with that vibrancy map, the more vibrancy they have, the taller those little spikes are. And then your more typical, subdivisions are a little bit flat. It's not that there isn't value there, it's just that it's not nearly as much as these concentrated areas of mixed use, right? Or of industrial too. Industrial is another high value. So when you think about, especially as towns, when you think about taxable value, even though your tax rate might be less in a village, that investment that you make or that investment that they make there for new development and expanding development just builds upon these tall spikes. And that can really help, with your bottom line for the whole town. And if you create a town center in your town, that's even better, because then now you've got one of these spots. And one of the things that we didn't get to, but I would still like to, is to have some kind of ratio. Like if you have a certain amount of people in an area, geographic area, how many do you need to have a center? right, to create one of these things. So we know how many to create, right? So if we know that we've got enough people here for a center, enough people here for a center, then we need to create 3, because you want them to be kind of within walking distance, you want them to be close. So that's just kind of a, relating vibrancy to value. All right, this is another new thing. And that 3D model isn't in the plan, by the way, that's just something I threw in the presentation. So this is kind of how we created this map that you're going to see a lot today, and you'll see a lot in the plan. We just keep repeating it. And these dots are centers. And you have traditional centers, emerging centers, town growth center, city center, and employment center. And we tried to capture the different concentrations that are, kind of show up on that 3D model on the vibrancy map. And then we also tried to pick places where we know, working with the towns and looking at development proposals, if we could, like where there can occur, so we can start to look at, like this is 31, we can start to look at that as a future mixed, multimodal transit corridor, right? So we know, like if we build out these nodes, then we can serve transit, we can help Centro design a transit system. It'll inform how we rebuild that road. It can inform where we put curb cuts and where we don't, where we need a parallel road and where we don't, all those different things that we still need to work on. This starts to give us an idea of what it's going to look like. And when I go to, or I or Jim D'Agostino or whoever it is goes to FHWA for money, we can say, look, we've worked with the towns, we've planned this out, this is the general idea of what we're looking at, and we need money to make this happen. And it's going to get us a lot farther with them as far as funding. If we have somewhat of a plan, it doesn't mean we can't change the plan, doesn't mean we can't come up with something different. It just gives us the systematic kind of architecture of the structure of what we're looking at in the future, potentially. And then of course, City of Syracuse shows up as a big city center. And then the gray dots are our employment centers. So here's Micron site, here's the Morgan Road area, the Village of Liverpool, this area out here in DeWitt that has a lot of commercial activity. And we kind of show a lot of pictorial examples of what these, like this is like a schematic of Shopping Town, what it could look like someday when we redevelop it into a mixed-use center. Still don't know where that is. I think that's in the Hudson Valley. It's a new town center that they built. This is the Village of Skaneateles, downtown Syracuse, and then this is like a Google campus out west, right? Which might be like a Micron campus in the future. And then the intersection growth centers, those are interesting because those are the ones that are like kind of along your main thoroughfares, like at West Genesee Street or 31 or someplace. And maybe they were busier at one time, but those are the places. The interesting thing about this is those are the places, if it's kind of an underutilized commercial area that doesn't have any residential, all those housing types that people are asking for, affordable housing, whatever is apartments, those are good places to put those in a mixed-use building. Quite honestly, because you're not in somebody's neighborhood, right? And you're providing the people that can support the retail. So I used to own a little bike shop in Marcellus, and I always wanted to renovate the building into apartments. I didn't get to do that, but Scott McClurg did. He bought it after I closed up, but he was one of my best customers, and he saw the potential of that building. He bought it, put a restaurant in, renovated apartments. Now we have a new mixed-use building downtown, right, that was vacant. That's one of the reasons why I opened a bike shop, because I was able to kind of get something going there. So, that's another really interesting thing about these intersection growth centers or these underutilized commercial areas. If you start mixing in residential, you can strengthen the commercial aspect of it, but you can also provide those housing units and housing types that people want, and you can do it in a way that they can walk to different services and different retail without having to get in a car, so it cuts down on traffic. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on when I show how these all come together. But we also included, this is a 2-page spread in the plan, elements of strong center, because one of the things we were trying to get to, because people ask us, you're talking about strong centers, we have all this, we're trying to get away from a lot of planning jargon here and trying to make it reachable, but we wanted to describe, these are the basic things that go into a strong center. Commercial, right? We talked about retail. Retail today, local business is driven by walkability. People got to be able to be walking around, just tapping into a shop and buy something. That really drives retail now as far as local businesses. Otherwise, people are shopping on Amazon, they're going to Walmart, or whatever it is. Gathering spaces, so having kind of public spaces, a little area where people can just gather or just sit in a park, whatever it is. Housing is also critical to a strong center. You got to have people that are right there. They're living there. They're kind of giving that energy to it. And unique, that's that placemaking part. You know, whatever it is in your community, if you're an agricultural community and have like a display of something agriculture, or if it's part of the Revolutionary War or whatever it is, you know, having those unique features that kind of tell your story. People that are visiting there like to see that, but it's a reflection of your community values, right? And it creates an interesting place to be in. And then mobility, walkability, right? Bikeability, being able to, you know, get to school or work in multiple different ways is really important for strong centers to thrive. And then mixed use, mixing all these things together in close proximity to each other really creates a very strong center. And listen, I'm just gonna tell you right now, this is not easy to do from scratch, okay? It's not. There's nothing easy about it. There's nothing easy about local government. I spent enough time working in it and working with local governments. Nothing about it is easy. But I think, as you know, it can be very rewarding when you get a really good result. So I already talked about the map. I don't know why I keep that in there. So mobility. One of the first things we heard, one of the first cards we got for how to make Onondaga a better place is more sidewalks. And we heard that over and over again. And we didn't prompt anybody with anything. We didn't have any materials or anything. We just had those cards and just asked them, we want to hear from you. Like, what do you want from your community? More trails, more bike lanes, more sidewalk, more places to walk, more places, you know, take your kids, playgrounds, whatever it is. But mobility is the ability to move. It's literally the definition of mobility, right? So when you go to Wegmans and buy toothpaste, you got like 40 different choices, right? It's kind of a pain. I would like to just have 3 choices, but when you go someplace, you maybe have at most 2, right? You can either bike, or you can drive, or you can take a bus, maybe. Or you can walk if you're lucky. And people want more. I mean, especially younger people want more, and older people that don't want to drive anymore, want more. They just want more choices. Whether they use them or not, who knows? But they absolutely are asking for it, and they want more of that. And also, to be competitive with other communities, we got to kind of keep up to a certain extent and offering those services and those options. So a lot of our initiatives are about, we have a grant from the Safe Streets for All program to do an action plan, and we have a commitment to become a Vision Zero community, which means 0 fatalities or serious injuries, and that includes bikes, pets, and drivers, everybody on the road. Investing in transit corridors, right? Investing in those black lines like a 31. What that turns into, what it becomes, is up to everybody in this room, right? But let's start to work toward what does that need to be in the future. Because if we don't start working on it now, it's going to be that much harder to do in the future when we need it. And then implement and expand and connect a network of bike lanes, trails, and multimodal corridors. I mean, this is something that we're absolutely already doing. Loop to Lake, with Empire State Trail, with lots of different things that we're working on. And I know everybody that we've talked to has always had some idea in their community of something that they want, or that they know that the people want. And then prepare for a transportation future. There's a whole lot of other things that are kind of on the leading edge. One of them is stations. They call them stations, right? And this is kind of out there on the leading edge of planning, but it's a place in these centers where you can go, or your kid can go and get on a bus, or get in, or their Uber can drop them off there, they can meet somebody else, and then they can get on, you know what I mean? It's like a little station in the community, and they can be small, or they can be large, but it's where those modes come together. And maybe you have a car service in the future. You don't even own a car, you just order one that comes and picks you up and takes you there so you can get on a different mode to go someplace else. I don't think it's gonna happen in my lifetime, but we just wanted to talk about it in the plan so that we can kind of say, we're thinking about this, we want to know when it does come up, we want to be prepared to figure out where it needs to be in our community, if at all. And then this is a cross-section of kind of a multimodal corridor. And this is like the kitchen sink, right? And this is everything. So you got typical sidewalks, your travel lanes, your typical travel lanes, you got dedicated bus rapid transit in the middle with stations. Just like a train, but it's a bus instead of a train, which is a lot cheaper to put in, by the way. Then you still have your local bus service, and you have protected bike lane or trail. But notice that mixed-use development and residential development are absolutely inseparable from this concept. You can't talk about modes of travel and transportation without talking about the land uses that are next to it, whether it's residential, or mixed use, or strictly commercial, whatever it is. They are absolutely dependent on each other. So this is another 2-page spread in the plan just to show, like, this is where all those things can go, and all the things that we need to look at. This isn't in the plan, but I want to throw this in there. We talk a lot about sidewalks. There's a lot of demand for sidewalks these days, but especially out here, I think at Lysander, Clay, Van Buren, Cicero. I saw this up in Canada, outside of Montreal, in a suburban area. This is in a commercial area. This isn't even a mixed-use area. This is in front of a gas station. And this is a 3-lane trail. It's 2 lanes bike and 1 lane walk. And there were people, there were kids on it, there were couples on it walking. It was kind of a rainy night. And this really went through this whole area and connected all of the suburban areas into it. This is just kind of, when people talk about sidewalks, I just want people to think kind of beyond the sidewalk, beyond the typical protected bike lane, beyond the usual. And especially out in the countryside, maybe you have a little bit more room, or it's a little bit faster, longer distances that people want to ride their bike on. This is the type of separation from traffic that makes everybody safer, not just bikes and pedals, but it makes drivers safer too, right? So this is just something this is kind of the direction I'm really trying to get us to go in. I think the Empire State Trail project, if you've ever ridden on that or walked on it, there's a lot of really great examples that Alta, as a consultant, kind of brought to that project as far as design features that we just didn't have in the community before. And so it's interesting to kind of evaluate locally, like, well, what could that be? What should we have there? What should that look like? And do we need it? And then this is the other thing, this is one I threw in. I saw this and my jaw hit the desk because I was like, holy cow. This is the mode share of commuters to downtown Denver over a 10-year period. Transit stayed about the same at about 40%. Walking went up 7%, so as a mode share, people walk more, it increased 7%. Biking went up 9%. Scooters only 1.7%, ride share 1.4%. Drive alone in your car went down 34.5%. And this is their Metropolitan Planning Organization. This is the same organization as SMTC we have locally. So when you put so they've got a new train, they've got bike lanes, they've got walking paths, they did a beautiful Platte River project with the trails and everything. When you put all that in your community over time, it will reduce the share of people driving alone in their car. If you give people those choices, you give people 42 choices of toothpaste, they're probably gonna try more than 2 or 3 over time, right? So this is kind of just, build it and they will come. There's a saying that I like, I don't even remember where I read it, but they said, nobody builds a bridge by counting how many people are swimming across the river, right? And it's true. So you can't say, well, nobody uses it. If you do that, that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you build it, people will use it. They'll find it. I mean, you look at Radisson, with the beautiful trail system you have in Lysander. I know people that I know that live in Lysander, like, oh, it's like great, you know, we can just go for a ride throughout our neighborhood. Our kids can get places on this trail. You know, it's wonderful. I was just, you know, on the way here, I came through the village of Liverpool, and there were all these people biking all over the place, and, you know, it's because of the lake trail, right? They're getting there, and they're just wanting to bike more. So the thing is that it does work. I really found this graph pretty amazing. So then, how do we organize that? So we kind of pick kind of our major corridors: our West Genesee Street, our 57, 31, 11. This is a bus rapid transit route and city from OCC out to Eastwood. So we kind of pick these major corridors based upon local input and also our own studies that SMTC has already done. This is Erie Boulevard. No, this is James Street. I'm sorry, this is Erie Boulevard. And then also the airport. We made sure to include the airport. And so these are the corridors that we picked. You know, 31 is obviously becoming a very important one to start looking at, I think. But also, SMTC has done studies basically from Brewerton to Nedrow along 11. So we have a lot of existing studies that we can build upon in that central corridor. And then as we address these, whether it's strong centers or through the corridor itself, you know, these are the kind of places that as a county we're going to start looking at, like how can we improve these corridors? How can we make them ready for the future, ready for the changes that we need to make? All right, housing neighborhood. So housing is a very popular topic, especially among the newspaper. It's a tricky one though, isn't it? There's a lot of different housing types. There's a lot of housing out there. So the city just completed a housing study. I don't know if they published it publicly yet. Megan, do you know if they have? It's really interesting to look at. It's really, the firm that did it, CZB, is the same firm that we're contracting with right now to do the countywide study. And they're amazing guys. They're very frank, they're very direct, and they do not mess around. They will tell you exactly what they think, which is great, which is really refreshing. But one of the things that we know is we need to expand housing choice. That's what we heard of a lot. You know, whether you're like me, like someday I would like to downsize from my home, you know, to something smaller. And as my wife says, our house is right next to the school. Our kids walk to school every day. Like we don't, a family needs to live here. somebody with kids that the kids would be able to walk to school. And I would love to be able to do that. But when you look at the choices that are out there, it can be kind of tough, right? Develop target marketed driven programs to support neighborhood health. So the reason we focus on housing and neighborhoods is that sometimes you have good houses, you have a good stable neighborhood, but maybe there are good, good stable housing stock in the neighborhood, but maybe they need a little modernizing. Maybe they're willing to have like, hey, if you want to put in street trees and a sidewalk and some street lighting, we would love to see that. It doesn't have to go throughout the whole neighborhood, but maybe just that one piece that will connect them to a center or to a commercial area. When we talk to supervisors, everybody has some example in their town, some place where that neighborhood would love to see something like that. Traffic calming, those different types of things. So how can we improve neighborhoods to make sure that that neighborhood, the houses stay viable, they stay on the market in a healthy way. And support and enhance the county's housing neighborhoods that I was just talking about. And of course, our community development office is doing a lot of work with that as well. One of the questions you get asked or you hear is like, especially this is pre-Micron, but if we're not growing, why do we need so much more housing? We've got all these houses, we've got all these units. Why do we need more housing? This shows household makeup. So the blue line is a house with a spouse and child. So a married couple with a child, just one child. In 1968, it was almost 70% of households. In 2019, it's 29%. So what does that mean? That means that you've gone to more single households. Households are split up. So now they need two houses. Kids aren't getting married as young, so they're staying in a single apartment longer, right? Or this yellow line is with other family or roommates, so that's gone up from about 5% to 21%. That's why, even if you didn't grow at all during this time period, you need about 20% more houses than what you had that you started with. So, if you're wondering why we need all these housing units and why we need different housing types like single, one-bedroom apartments or two-bedroom apartments, this is why. It's because our households have changed. The nature of our households have changed dramatically. And so this is in the plan. This is an interesting graphic. And there's so many studies. I've read so many studies about this, and they all come to the same conclusion. It's all the same thing. Does that mean we don't need single-family homes anymore? Of course not. Of course we do. There's still a desire out there. There's still a demand out there. We know that houses are more expensive than ever to build. That's another thing is affordability, right? If people are spending all their money on transporting themselves or on their house, and they don't have that discretionary income to support local businesses, and so your economic development suffers locally. Agriculture, we have a very robust agricultural program, Onondaga grown, farmland preservation. We just finished, as we were doing this plan, we also finished an agriculture and farmland protection plan that was adopted in December. And we're really excited about implementing a lot of measures in there. We heard a lot from farmers. We talk a lot with farmers whenever we can, and we hear a lot of things. And one of the biggest problems, besides getting truck drivers like everybody else, is competing for land. When people buy a 20-acre house lot, that's 18 acres or so that a farmer can't use anymore if it's good farmland, right? So they are competing, just like everybody else for land, and they need more of it. They need as much of it as they can get to keep doing what they're doing. One of the really cool things about Onondaga County is that we can create all the food we need within the county. We have that ability. We have those kind of soils. Our soils in this county are not only unique in the state or the country, they're unique globally. There are places in the world that would love to have a percentage of high, prime soils that we have here. And so we need to protect those, and a lot of farms include natural resources, right? So by protecting the farms, we're also protecting a lot of natural resources. There's great stream buffer programs and all those different things that farms participate in to protect natural resources. And we created kind of a model farm just to kind of show all the things that farmers need to do to stay viable. And the best way to protect farmland is to have a strong agricultural economy. You don't necessarily have to, buy if the farm is really strong, they don't need you to buy the development rights to keep the farm going, right? And we have really strong farms. So, but some of the things that they do is they add a farm stand in, or they have like a little U-pick, center. They have some renewable energy on their farm. Not enough to kill the farm, not the whole farm, but just a little bit to give them some income, so they can have a steady income. Which for a farmer, I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure some of you have owned your own business. Having that steady check, you never appreciate a steady check more until you open your own business. Like, holy cow, I really took that for granted. So for them to lease land for solar, a portion of it, that steady check to them is really important. And then other things, like agritourism, having events there, weddings, whatever it is, that's all kind of extra income for them that keeps that farm going and keeps it viable. And a big part of keeping that going is local regulations. So, I learned years ago, if you have a farm where they weld their own equipment and they're, qualified to do that, and they can open a little welding shop to kind of support their farm as well. If you don't allow that as a land use, then you're kind of hurting that farm's ability to make money. Now you can put some controls on it, but it's better to let them kind of do what they do and be a normal farm like they did in the old days, and just like, hey, you want me to weld your plow? Like, I'll weld it for you. Like, you just gotta kind of let them be a business just like any other business. So these are the benefits, the community that's in the plan. And then on the map, the agricultural areas are the lighter green. The darker green is blueways and greenways that I'm going to talk about next. So this is, typically an agricultural area in old zoning law in towns. They would consider it agriculture until it was something else, right? That was kind of at least that was the perception from a lot of farmers I talked to. This on this map is really saying, look, this is primarily an agricultural area. We need to work to keep it that way. And this is your scenic vistas, this is your working landscape, this is your pastoral landscape, and we want to make sure that it stays that way. Up here in someplace like Cicero, the farms are important, but a lot of those vegetable farms are the kind of quality of life issue too. Being able to go down the street and buy local produce, like here at Emmy's or Abbott's, that's a big deal. That's a huge thing. To be able to be in your community, go down and get a basket of strawberries, it's growing right next door. I mean, that's a great thing. And not trucked in, or trained in all the way to California. So that's what this map is about. And so that's kind of what we're working with this map, is to kind of commit those areas. And a lot of that ag is still in the greenways and blueways, which I'll talk about in a second. Greenways and blueways. So this is not a new concept in the county, but we tried to put it in the context of, this was really important to people, right? This has been really important in the county for a long time. And it's near and dear to my heart. It's kind of one of my topics that I did when I was at ESF as a graduate student in the Camillus Valley Natural Area, doing planning with the land trust there. I also used to run a land trust. I used to be executive director of a land trust. But this is the place, I think the reason it's so important to people is this is where people go and do things, right? Whether it's hunting or fishing, or riding your bike, or hiking, or whatever it is. These are the areas where you're going to go do that, where you're going to go have fun with your family, or you're going to get some fresh air, or enjoy nature, or whatever it is. And it's also a way that we can connect communities. One of our greenways in this county is the Erie Canal, right? And now it's got the Empire State Trail, it's got Loop to Lake. We get thousands and thousands of people who use that every day, especially in the summer, but year round. And whether it's snowmobiling, or cross-country skiing, or riding your bike, or walking, or whatever it is, these are really important to people for quality of life and what makes living here better for them. So we really want to formalize a systematic way of planning for these. And what that really means is that we can put the structure together, but what we want is that local participation. We want to provide the structures that people can meaningfully participate in planning for those greenways. Now, greenways doesn't mean there's no development either. There's different types of greenways, right? There's a conservation greenway. So when I did my master's degree project, that was a 250-acre easement in a floodplain, and we still had fishing access, but it was pretty limited as far as recreation went. It was really a natural greenway. But then there's recreational greenways, so whether it's, for fishing or camping or mountain biking or hiking or whatever it is, those are areas where we want more trails, we want more people to be in there. We want to program it, for people to use it. Or maybe for the conservation greenway, we're trying to do flood attenuation, right? We just want to set aside those wetlands so when the creek overflows, we're not flooding on somebody's house. We want to kind of take that off the market. And then we have, again, I can't be up here without talking about blueways a little bit. Blueways, let's get that. I'm going to come back to that. Where's my map, Megan?
Which map?
Let's go back to this map. All right, so blueways, all these blue areas on the map are blueways that we're going to plan for. So blueway is like a water trail. As I take in a trail on land, and where you might have a sign that says the village is over this way or that far, you can go this way, or there's bathrooms over here, there's a park over here. Blue Ways kind of do the same thing, so they make it more accessible for people to access the water, whether it's by, by canoe or by motorboat, or whatever it is. And from, Baldwinsville, you can drive your boat all the way into Inner Harbor and be in downtown Syracuse. That's a really unique feature that we have in Onondaga County. And so the Blue Way program really is, what do we do with that? What can we do with that to make that better? And there is an example in the plan about, on Cuba Lake, they did a Blue Way Trail program. And it just gives people the resource so that they don't feel, there's no barriers for them to say, I'm gonna go out in my kayak and go around the Onondaga Lake, but I'm not gonna have to, this is gonna tell me, oh, there's a bathroom at Onondaga Lake Park over here, I can go into the village and grab a beer over here, whatever it is, that trail, that organization will do to kind of give people a little bit more access to that water. All right. And then the benefits, ecology, I talked about, economy. These greenway areas increase property values next to it. This goes back to the 19th century. Studies have been done to show this. They absolutely increase the value of properties next to a greenway. So having those in your community not only makes your whole community more valuable, it makes the properties next to it more valuable. And I'll talk about that in a second. It creates place, like we talked a lot about placemaking. We're trying to make them even across the board. So the city of Syracuse has beautiful parks throughout the city. How can the city enhance those for people? How can they, because parks, especially in an urbanized area, they can go either way, right? Sometimes parks, they look great, but if you ask people, they'll say, well, I don't send my kids that way because they're dealing drugs or something's happened over here or something, whatever, So that's like a policing issue. So we're trying to make it so everybody has the same kind of access to these resources. And then connectivity, having those trail systems, if you can put them in that greenway, which are not another thing that's not easy always to do, then that's great. We can connect people in communities and they can do it in a healthy way. Conservation subdivision is what this is about. This is another tool that's not super easy to put in place, but it's a very valuable tool to have, especially in a rural town. I wrote what seems to be from the people that took over after me, seems to be working pretty well, the conservation subdivision code down in the town of Dryden. It seems to work pretty well. But the idea is to take the same number of houses, but you put them on, they don't all have to be on smaller lots, but you put more of them on smaller lots so you can set aside the natural areas. This is kind of a land disposal method of development, and this is a conservation subdivision method of development. And then somebody has to take ownership of that natural area or have an easement on it. This is great for developers because they have less costs in developing. They have less costs in roads. That means the town has less costs in roads because there's just less of them. And they sell faster because they're next to protected green areas and they sell at a higher value. So it's kind of like everybody wins, right? And they're like a really nice place to live. But they're not always easy. They're not always appropriate either. One of the things I did when I wrote that law was there were certain zoning districts that it was mandatory. You had to at least show the analysis. You had to show where those natural areas were, where those resources were, and then you had to show the difference between the development, and then it was up to the planning board to decide, is this working, is it not working, is it worth doing, is it not worth doing? I mean, there is a little bit of that, but one of the main things that we want to do in this Greenway program is kind of catalog those natural resources for you so that you know when to look for opportunities like that. And that was really helpful to us in the town of Dryden. Cornell had kind of cataloged all of the really unique natural resource areas, so we knew what to look for. But we also had 2 big state forests, so anything near the state forest, we knew you got to set aside a big chunk of that because we know that the state will die in the future. All right, or maybe not, maybe just have an easement there. This section is actually really interesting to read, but this is the history of planning in Onondaga County from the post-war plan in 1945 all the way through today. And these dots correspond to our 5 themes. And what this shows you is that from the 1945 plan, we had 4 out of 5, all the way up through, all these things have been talked about since 1945. All right, so this plan, we don't pretend this plan is going to be the holy grail that makes everything happen magically all at once. All right, but it just shows I wanted to put this in here so that people could see we're not just making this stuff up. This isn't just out of nowhere. This is in plans going back to 1945, and they all kind of read the same: quality of life, efficiency of services, all those different things. So how do these things really apply to us today, and how do we move forward is what this plan is trying to address. And then what we did at the end was we took this map and we tried to show how it all comes together. That's what this map is for in a two-dimensional format. And then what we did was if you drill in, we tried to drill in on a little area of the map, right? And then try to show it in a 3D model and show how these things come together and how they work together. And there's several pages of this. I'm not going to go through all. But you can see, we have agriculture out here, and we have a greenway that comes through, that comes all the way in through this neighborhood and into this commercial area. And then this is one of those corridors, right? One of those transit corridors, multimodal corridors. And then the darker purple is kind of new development or redevelopment of sites. And what we've shown here is that kind of the creation of a strong center, not on the corridor itself so much, but off of it. And the key thing here is that you create kind of a smaller road network. And you've got some new housing here, you got mixed use here, you got some mixed use on the corner, but you don't want to kind of reduce the utility of that corridor. You still need to move people up and down that corridor, right? Traffic, buses, whatever it's going to be. But you create that kind of walkable center off of it. And the key thing about this is that this existing neighborhood has access to it and it serves them. One of the things we know, like Cicero was at our first meeting on Monday, they had that housing development they turned down. And people wondered why they turned it down when we know we need all this housing. It didn't serve the community. They didn't see anything in it for them. They just saw cars and people, more traffic in an area that's already congested. And if that's but if you have a vision for a center that you want to create, and you show that this is going to have sidewalks, it's going to have a sense of place, and it's going to have retail, and it's going to have services and things that everybody says that they want in their community, then there's something there for them. And then when you start building it out, maybe they say, oh, that's great, they're finally starting to build that out, right? But you got to create that vision first. You got to show them what it could be, and what the potential is, and how it could potentially serve them, and how they can get there, and how you're going to make sure that people can get there in the future. And it's going to serve them. And the more you can do this in your community, the better. And that doesn't mean that the other things aren't going to happen. It's just that this is really, there's books that I've read and everything about this. There's such a huge lag in the economy. This is what employers are looking for. This is where they're looking to locate their offices. This is where people are choosing to live near something like this. So the more that you can do this in your community, or take what you already have and make it stronger, then the better off we'll all going to be, right? I'm starting to love this TV. Anyone in my office? Yeah. Megan's like, oh God, don't get one. No, we'll be in there all the time. We'll be doing this all the time. So then we really, just so you know, it's not just graphic, but we show like these little dots, showing all the services, and how they kind of mix together, how they work together, and how you can get different places. But there's also a lot of text that kind of describes and kind of walks people through that. And then, we continue, we're kind of showing the same thing all the way out to the agricultural areas where you have the farm, you have a farm stand, you have a music venue, you have, a kayak launch or whatever. And that is kind of it. But that 3D model at the end is that's kind of a cool section because it really takes those themes and shows how they all work together. And then I did add the slide at the end. Some of the things that we're doing, as you know, our town planning grant program that we did a few years ago has been pretty successful, and we're continuing that with funding more comp plans for several different towns. Town centers program is something we'd like to create. Safe Streets for All action plan I talked about. The thing about that's a $450,000 grant that we got from the Federal Highway Administration, and that's going to be countywide and citywide, and that's going to make us eligible. Not just the county, but you guys as well, for $30 million a year for bike path improvements, which is a lot of money, right? So we wanted to make sure we got that planned out, so we would be eligible for that money. SMTC is doing a lot of work. They've been a great partner. They're working on a model right now. They're updating their model so we can start some of these changes we're talking about, some of these things we're looking at, we can put in the model, employment centers, residential, whatever it is, we can show how it affects our roadway system. And that's really going to support any ask that we have of the federal government for money for future projects, whether they're big or small. Our housing market study, we're going to get started on that hopefully in July with CCD, with Charles Wilkie. That's going to be countywide. The first thing we're going to do is do a study. It's going to be about 9 months. And then from there, we're hoping to continue that effort and have like a steering committee and make sure that we're really identifying all the strategies that we need to create the housing that we need for the people that live here now and the people that are coming. Then our Greenways and Blueways program, we want to get off the ground. And then our agritourism program. We have a new agritourism program that we're going to be rolling out this summer, trying to help farms, either enhance what they have or create new ones or whatever it is, kind of expand that market. Because when we did the agriculture and farmland protection plan, one of the things we discovered is that there's actually even more potential in agriculture for that type of thing. So with that, I'll take any questions or receive any comments. Is even better.
Question. In preparing a comprehensive plan with micro as the targeted employer and the number of employees they can bring to the area, how many should we be planning in an area? I mean, I would think that a lot of them would like to stay close to where they're working. So is that 2,000? Is that 4,000? Or is it?
So it's, as you know, it's like a 20-year project, right?
Yeah.
I mean, within the next 5 or 10 years, you're gonna have something on the ground. And, it's funny because we just sat through a little seminar yesterday with some grad students that have done a project and that are working on a project with economic development. And even they were looking at different sites in the country. And I told them, they said, well, how do you feel like about this? And I said, with this plan, I'm looking at it, even Arizona is doing a great job with, they already have Intel and getting other things. And even the site out in Malta, they looked at, and I said, I kind of feel like we're ahead of the game a little bit. We're starting our housing study, we got this plan, we know a development pattern countywide that we can start working on. I know the towns and villages are gonna be, working on their comp plans. As far as the numbers go, so the good news is I feel like we really are on the right track of what we're doing right now. I mean, we're doing everything right. And the timing isn't bad, we're actually in a good place. As far as the numbers go, I think our housing study is going to tell us a lot more about that. Because it's going to these guys are really detailed and they really look at neighborhood health and housing health and of existing stuff. And then they look at the market as far as like what people are anticipating, what they're looking at, how much transitional housing do you need, how much permanent housing do you need, how will that affect people that are downsizing their homes and villages that are attractive to people that are starting a family. So I think the answer is in a couple of years we're going to have a better idea of the actual numbers. But if you create the places, right, that people want to be, they're going to want to live there. Because I'll tell you, the thing about the jobs, one of the interesting numbers, I can't remember our percentage, but the percentage of in-commuters into our county. So people that work here now, but drive in from outside of the county, we need to capture those people. I mean, just this plan alone will help to capture those people to encourage them to live here, right? And that's a very common thing in upstate New York. I worked out for Board of Planning, helped Board of Planning for Otsego County years ago. It's a very rural county, but those people that live there all drove outside the county to get jobs because there weren't a lot of jobs in Otsego County except for maybe Onondaga or Cooperstown, right? And that really hurt the effectiveness of local services. So that one of the big issues, one of the reasons that we learned about that was because the fire departments were like, we can't get volunteers because they all work 2 hours away, right? So we have people commuting in. They're probably commuting in because that's where they're from Auburn, or they're from even Rochester, they commute in, or Oswego, or wherever it is, and this is where the jobs are. So how do we attract these people to live here? That's the first thing. And then it's the same way that we're going to attract people to live here that are coming from Micron. If they're working at the plant, this is one of the conundrums of this plan, and you know this very well, is it's such a big site, and it needs to be a big site, right, for this plant to do what they need to do, especially at the size they're talking. But one of the dilemmas in planning is that we over-separated uses in the past, so that people have to drive everywhere. So now we're trying to integrate those uses a little bit better so that people can live at least closer to where they work. And that's why, when we have those sites near Micron, those are the ones that we're trying to maximize to the extent that we can, but there's always limits on that, right? There's limits to transportation, there's limits to sewer, there's limits to water, whatever it is, electricity capacity, all those things. So I think we need to look at what are the realistic capacity of these places. And then of course it comes down to the towns and villages themselves. How much do you want? How much development do you want? Right? How many more people do you actually want? And what do you want it to look like? How do you want it to function? How does it affect your quality of life? We're doing a plan out in Skaneateles right now on the Hamlet plan. That's the first thing we heard. We don't want any. I was like, okay. That's okay. That's fair enough. I hear you. I can relate to that. But one of the things that we explained, and Sam Gordon, our consultant on this with EDR, has been very patient, very good with working with them, because we said right from the beginning, if you don't want development, you still need to plan for that, right? You still need to do the planning and the work to make sure that your community, if you want to stay the way it is, then you still got to do the work to make sure it does stay the way it is. And if you want change, you got to work to make the change. So I think a lot of it, the reason I'm excited for all these towns to do their comp plan right now, is you're going to communicate to the world, this is who we want to be, and this is the type of life we want, and this is how we want to live our life, and this is we don't want to, have too much traffic, or we don't want to have, too many people, we don't want our schools overloaded, or we want to keep our class sizes smaller, whatever it is, whatever the issue is. That's your chance to kind of communicate to the world, this is the type of town we want to be, and you know what, it's okay. We've got plenty of room in the county to accommodate a lot of people. That sanitary district was designed in 1968, right, Megan? Infrastructure specialist, was designed for 700,000 people. We've got 468,000 now. So we've got room within that sanitary district for 232,000 people. Did I do the math right? Did you check in on that? Ellison, did you check in on that?
Our population.
Don't let me do math like that on the fly, because I'll screw it up. Yes.
So I'm from the Village of Liverpool. Been doing planning board work with them for a long time. Started, of course, way back with the county settlement plan. We did the village master plan, did align with that. We were very clear about transportation and traffic and issues that we're having. I see in Plan Onondaga plan, their transportation and walkability is still main features. Very consistent with the prior plans. Still a huge problem, getting worse. We don't need 6 lanes of traffic through the Village of Liverpool. How do we effectively address that now with the county roads and state roads that go through our area when we are working on these improvements for walkability, greenways, blueways, strong centers, and this is the traffic works in direct opposition of that. How do we fix it?
Well, I wish I had an easy answer for that one. I don't think anybody does, but you're right. Yeah, the Village of Liverpool definitely has more than their fair share of traffic and lanes of travel, and so kind of there's two sides of that, right? It's like how do you capture that? Like how do you capture it commercially or from a development standpoint to actually make some benefit locally from it? Because you're not going to get rid of all of it, right? But then how do you reduce it, or how do you use traffic calming and things like that? I think one of the opportunities that I don't know if it was anticipated. I know SMTC did a study not that long ago, but they looked at it's actually quicker to go across the thruway and down 81 into town instead of going through the Village of Liverpool. And that was before they took away the toll booths. And so some of it might just be communication, right? Like letting people know, it's actually quicker if you go over here. The other thing we looked at.
So the communication isn't really necessary for the people in the village?
Right. To the people coming through. That's right.
Folks.
Yeah, and how you do that?
Especially northern suburbs that go through the village.
Right.
So how is the Onondaga plan going to address it?
Well, this plan isn't going to address it directly, but one of the things that we've looked at is how can we increase mode options? How can we give people more options to get from those northern suburbs into downtown and vice versa without getting in their car, right? Kind of reducing that mode share and increasing others if we can, especially in the future, going forward. And then, the other thing is we can take that message to SMTC because they're really good with a communication strategy and encouraging people. The other thing we can do is work with employers. One of our focus groups for this plan was large employers in the area and say, hey, the Village of Liverpool has asked us to talk to you about how many, maybe we can study how many employees, and there's big data too. You can use big data to it's kind of a scary concept, but you can track cell phones. Not your not personally you, but just how many people travel through there and where did they come from, where are they going? And then maybe employers can incentivize people to not go that way or to take a different mode of travel. So there's a lot of things out there that we're not really doing right now that maybe we should start looking at, or that we need to start looking at, especially moving forward. But as far as there's a couple places in the county that it's as far as status quo and fixing the status quo, there's no easy fix and there's certainly no cheap fix either.
A lot of the connecting corridors are county roads, and historically, unfortunately, Onondaga County DOT, wasn't for sidewalks or all that stuff. They said we don't like sidewalks. is this plan gonna kind of change that thinking, that they might be more open to when they, you know, go to do a road improvement, that they might include it with
Yes, I think that change has already occurred before this plan. I don't want to commit them to anything, but I know one road that they're redesigning right now, just a paving project, they're absolutely incorporating some type of roadside trail through there and a lane reduction too. So, yeah, they're learning, and they definitely have a desire. One thing I learned about highway engineers in general, not just our own, but others that I've talked to, is when they do this, they want to do it right. They want to do it really well, and they want to do it right. They don't want to just have a patch. And they don't want to have something that's not going to last 5 years. They want to do something that's really going to last a long time, that they can service, that the towns and villages can commit to maintaining and want to, because they actually will be able to. So there's, you know, they're really thinking about how they can do it. And we have a slate of projects that, around county roads and state roads, that we're hoping that the Safe Streets for All program will really give that initiative and that kind of energy and financial resources to kind of make things happen quicker. Yeah. So I think the tide is definitely turned on that. And I think that we have to start, and it's not just the county either. Town, I think everybody, like these strong centers, you know, that's a different type of street than towns are, you know, used to creating. And probably, you know what, your town, I'm familiar with town highway standards from working with towns for over 25 years. I mean, they're probably not gonna make it. You're going to have to figure out something else, but you're gonna have to figure it out. Like, I'm not, you know, we'll help, but you guys are gonna have to figure out what works for you and what works for your people.
Well, I want to piggyback off of what both of the last few speakers have said. We're talking about congestion in the village of Liverpool. We have congestion in the village of Baldwinsville. One of the foundational stones of this plan is that alternate transportation. To put it as kindly as possible, Central was not up to the task. If you build it, they will come mentality, that foundational stone has got to be in place.
Yeah.
For us.
I agree. So,
What is the county doing to place that foundational stone?
so good news, we met with their new planner yesterday for Central, and she's pretty amazing. And she's bringing a lot of energy, and they're reimagining what their transit system could be. And we talked about a few things, like our kind of pet projects that we're looking at in this plan. And she was really smart. She's like, you know, like bus rapid transit. She said, FTA requires a certain potential amount of riders off the bat in order to put that in place. That's why in the city, those routes are where they are. And I said, well, how do we create a transformational system that developers can then follow up and build the communities that we want? And she's like, I don't know. So, but we're having that conversation, and we're gonna figure that out. And if we have a micron, right, and everybody says, we need to relook at this roadway, and we get the grant from the federal government to do that, then we can start working with them to say, listen, we might need something different than what you guys
So we
do.
don't want to fall into the trap of they need X, Y, Z for them to proceed,
Right.
and
Exactly.
we need them to proceed before we can provide X, Y, Z.
Exactly. It's almost like they want us to create a problem that we have to solve, instead of just having a transformational infrastructure
Let's
piece.
create the solution.
I mean, you
first.
think about our interstate highways, like they didn't wait for people to build up the suburbs before they put the interstate
You said it yourself,
highway,
we're counting the
They put the
suburbs.
highway and put the exits in, and everybody built around it. It's the same thing. Like if you create these nodes and you create that piece of infrastructure, the developers will absolutely follow and build the community that you want, right? So that's what we got to work toward. But there are challenges there for sure. But I think Centro is, again, I think the tide is turning that. She was really on top of it. She's got over 20 years experience in municipal government as a planner. And so we were really excited to meet with her and have that resource, somebody to talk to and move forward. So that was a great question. That was a good point for sure. John?
I'm from the village of Baldwinsville, and you know, the road issue, we have state roads.
Yeah.
And you know, I picked up on, you know, the advocacy piece, because you know, the state just redid one of the roads in the village last year, I think, and there's not a lot of communication, you know, and they put in concrete curbs instead of the standard where villages and towns don't have much of a say. But I think by collaborating, we could. A couple other things. I think this plan is really great. I've followed it, you know, through its various stages. I'm particularly interested in the conservation subdivisions. The village of Baldwinsville, I think over the last 30 years, has sort of pretended it's a suburban area, and the planning zoning rules make new development look suburban. And in fact, there's more than 80% of the village footprint currently doesn't meet the village code as it's all future building is done. And I see conservation subdivisions as a way back to creating greater density, more of the village feel. And I recognize that there's a need to sort of undo our current code and zoning rules to make that happen. We're probably less interested in the sort of conservation part because we don't have a lot of undeveloped property, but we are very interested in maintaining and restoring that density that builds out the center and walkability.
So in the village, it's generally called a cluster subdivision. It's in New York State law and everything else. So and the reason that it's different is that a cluster subdivision, you can create that green space that enhances your neighborhood. It might be a pocket park, it might be a top lot, whatever it is, right? That might be a green or like bigger setbacks and like more of a tree line street or whatever you're gonna do, right? But it does depend on kind of condensing the same amount of housing and creating that density, but then having those public green spaces. So yeah, there's definitely techniques to do that, and you're right. I mean, you know, in the conversation we had yesterday in Marcel, which is where I live, and I was planning board chair for several years there. So I know the village pretty well, and I've seen some, before 2008, you know, we saw some pretty big, for Marcel's, development proposals, and, you know, people think that, oh, well, we're all built out. It's like, well, you're not built out. You're not built out at all. Like, there is definitely, depending on what you want as a local community, you could absolutely add density. You could add, you know, more units, or more houses, even just regular houses, you know. So yeah, but I do, you know, you really do have to reimagine. It's always healthy to reimagine what you want to be and what that vision is, and kind of touch base with the public and just see that, make sure you're meeting their needs. And then, you know, it's not a judgment thing. It's just make sure you're creating the place that you want to live in, that you want to continue to be. And that is something that will survive too, that will keep going. Because if you do get it wrong, then you're going to have an erosion, right? I worked in a hamlet, did a hamlet plan. It was a very elaborate plan. It was a hamlet right next to Cornell, and water, sewer, and people had said no to development for years and years and years and years. And what happened was they became a very poor community, right? The properties just got run down, nobody was building anything because they weren't allowed to. And people moved away, and so finally got to the point where people were like, oh, you know what, we can't stay no anymore. We need something else. So we created a whole vision of what really fit the character that they wanted and showed how development, and we let them show us through a whole 3D model that they could put different development types down on, and we created that vision and created a code that met it. And so then things actually started to happen. It started getting some renewal. So I mean, when you do it, it does work. And you can have 2 layers of code too. You can have that vision on the spot, but then have that base layer of zoning that allows kind of the normal stuff until somebody's ready to start building that. But really creating that locally, you know, led and locally produced vision is really important. Yeah, and you do have to do it. You have to do it, you know, on a regular basis. I think Lysander is really great. You guys are always looking at your land use plan and updating it and kind of asking those questions. And when solar comes in, you're asking those questions about that. So it's an iterative process, they call it. I almost find that when you don't have development, you almost have to do it more often because people forget. And then something comes along and like, wait, what are we doing? What do we want to do? You know, but when development happens, when you actually have that, and people build it, you don't have to do it again because it's built, it's done. You know, you just move on to the next spot, right? So.
Quick comment question. Probably no builders in here, so I can say it, but I was with a builder. Actually, I was with Dan, we did the Hamlet. So locally, builders aren't that creative, right? So it's traditional single-family lots, the market can buy those. There hasn't been much of a delta between a townhouse lot, say, and a regular single-family home lot in terms of cost. I see. Would there be some money available through the county or somewhere to help towns, communities sort of pre-plan actually layouts of subdivisions that are more creative versus just waiting for having a color on a map that says R1
Right.
for this 400 acres. Just because, you want the developers obviously to spend the money and do the planning and do the, the layouts, but if there was a pool of money that towns could use to get a head start on some of this,
Yes.
people can envision it
Yes.
versus, reacting at the public hearing when they get the notice and see something different's going on in their neighborhood.
Right. So right now, we're funding several comprehensive plans, but we are holding, or not holding, we just have also some money that we're going to program. We've shortlisted some community design and planning firms to do just like they're called a sub-area plan. And so you work with the community, you work with the landowners, you work with the builders, the developers, and they say, listen, we want to create that vision for this place and what it could be. And one of the things, like when I did the animal planning and a couple other plans is, when you show it, and people say, because they might say, oh, we don't want a gas station there. But then you show like, well, if they put in the street trees and the buffer and this, that, and that thing, they say, well, if it looks like that, that would be great. So then as a planner, this is when I was a town planner, I said, okay, well, I'm gonna incorporate that into the code. So when somebody builds there, they gotta build that other stuff in, all the stuff that people actually want. Because they generally they want the store, they want the service, but they don't want, the poor aesthetics or the rundown aesthetic or whatever it is. And that could be the same thing for residential or mixed use district or commercial district. So yeah, so we are absolutely planning on doing it. So we have like 5 firms, 2 of them are kind of bigger national firms that bring a lot of resources, that a lot of local firms don't have, and then we have like 3 more regional firms that are shortlisted so that, when we work with the community, we don't have to go through big RFP process. We can do what's called a mini bid and just start doing it, and start cranking them out. But yeah, that's great. That's a great point. That's exactly what we have to do.
And I mean, I professionally, I do site selection nationally so I see that and what everybody's looking for. And, these mixed-use communities, that's, the target that I've been putting my product in. But I'm on the planning board here. I've done projects locally in the past, wearing different hats. I got tried to do a gas station in front of the Express Mart, in front of, on 31 and whatever it was, Tobin Meadows, right? That, I took arrows for 9 hours of public hearings, eventually got shot down, So I wear both hats. And, if we get a little bit of, pre-planning done to help, that'd be wonderful.
Well, thanks for bringing that message. It's better to hear it from you guys, because I say it all the time.
Well, I don't know, maybe who knows if everybody agrees.
Well, I'm a planner, so everybody thinks something, of course they must have.
Yeah, right.
I have a question.
Sure.
So counties, put this plan together. What if one of the towns isn't in agreement with the county's idea? I mean, you had alluded to, the town letting the county know what they want to do. And, you have emerging centers. What if the town wants to pull back on that? I mean, what's the push or pull from the county? I mean, is there, because I look at Micron in Route 31 and growing up here, it's just a whole bunch of problems. Traffic. How do you've got to make a whole new exit, and you have an opportunity there to change the way 31 goes to 81 and stop the debacle that is Cicero from 4 to 6 o'clock at night. I'm hoping that's going to happen, but right now it's all a lot of hearsay.
Yeah.
Our problem in Lysander, Baldwinsville is we've pushed all of our retail into the village for our town planning for years. You don't see any big strip malls on 31 in Lysander. So we have to go to either Van Buren to go to the grocery store, or we have to go to Clay. We have opportunities in Radisson still. I mean, with Radisson being a PUD, mixed-use development, we still have retail and commercial areas where something could be built. We still have a couple 100 acres of different areas where people can walk to it. But what's the county, what if we don't want to do something along those lines? I mean, or is the county going to sit there and, give a presentation like, hey, you have a lot of opportunity here?
Yeah,
we have a traffic problem getting out of Lysander.
Yeah.
We have a highway, but it's
Right.
on the wrong side of town.
Well, believe me, we are absolutely Megan and I probably once a day talking about how we're gonna get this 31 plan. And we just wanna get it started, so you guys can give all your input into it. And then even those.
bridge.
Yeah. What's that?
A bridge.
The bridge, well, the bridge, yeah, that's another part of it. But to your point, those, some of those dots are places that we know.
is a great idea,
Yeah.
but where does it go to? it dumps in Van Buren where you don't have capacity. You'd have to expand Van Buren Road to get to 690.
Right.
Or you'd come further down to Seneca Knolls, and how do you get to Jones Road?
Yeah.
I mean, these
Yeah,
are the
those are the-
realities that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and absolutely, and those are the types of things that, towns and villages can bring to the table and say, how are we gonna figure this out? What do we need to do? How's it gonna impact us? That's why we have a model to kind of show us how it's gonna not just impact that area, but the whole corridor and all the other interchanges. I think that especially, with Micron and with that type of a project, there's a lot of moving pieces, right? If you look at, was it Greensboro, North Carolina? When they did the pre-planning, just looking at transportation infrastructure for the city, and then they had a 1,500 acre mega site outside. If you look at their plan, their countywide plan, which isn't too different from this, but it's a little bit more detailed, they had like 19 interchanges that they had to upgrade. And this is before they even have somebody building there, before they even know somebody's gonna go there, just the kind of their pre-planning. So that's what I'm telling you is, yeah, there's a lot of places that we gotta look at. And we can't do it all at once. So whoever is ready to go, and especially where there's kind of existing development being proposed, that's kind of where we're focusing right now. And then where people are willing and where people see a need and where people are ready to start planning and doing that work, we're gonna work with them and get you the resources that you need. If you're hesitant, then we're gonna find out why you're hesitant and what you're worried about, and then we'll work through that. But it's all a process. I mean, everybody's at a different kind of point, mentally, whatever. I mean, so we just kind of figure out where you're at and meet you where you are and help you to move forward and get the community that you want, right?
Well, and then we have.
So, but you're right, there's a lot, I mean, everything you want, anytime you do a big project like that, there's gonna be a lot of things to talk
We have,
about.
we have a business park that I watch people walking to work at 6 o'clock in the morning because there aren't buses.
Yeah.
And there's no bus, collection points in the Radisson Business Park, and I watch people standing on corners waiting for the bus to come. There's one little bus sign, they happen to know that there's a bus stop there. And those are the kind of things that we need. We got to change the mentality of how most people are just used to driving everywhere up here without taking a bus, but we don't have a bus to take.
Yeah.
There's nothing convenient about getting to the northern suburbs by riding a bus.
Right, right, it's true,
And with Amazon and Micron, that's how it changed.
yeah.
Oh, and your truck traffic. Look at all the
Yeah.
issues in Liverpool with trucks. I mean, I don't know, but I would bet quite a few of them are probably because Amazon being over there now is people are watching just regular GPSs and ended up on the parkway. They shouldn't be. But that's, it was an issue in the village. If you get a truck that comes through the middle of town, he can't turn, coming up 48. And they're like, oh, Route 48, I could get on that. Then they take out a pole in the middle of the 4 corners. So it's got to be addressed.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I just one more comment, just because I want to ring the bell while I've got people. I know you guys didn't do the Inner Harbor waterfront plan. That was
Well, we did.
City,
It was our agency.
I made comments, I talked to somebody on the phone,
Cool.
but one, I'm a Blue Way user. I try to go to the Inner Harbor, I do everything I can via river, when I can. But that channel from the lake to the Inner Harbor, you never know.
You never know.
Until you get stuck.
Yeah.
So you avoid it. So my comment just was, is there some mechanism somewhere where you could go and look that up and say, hey, when's the last time this has been dredged? How deep is it?
Yeah.
I drove through there yesterday, there was bigger boats in the harbor, so it must be better.
Yeah, with the rain house.
Yeah, but.
It was dredged about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I got stuck in there like 2 years ago.
Did you?
And that's never a pleasant experience.
No. For sure, especially there.
So.
There's probably places where that would be a great one.
Yeah, so
Like
I,
a Caribbean or something.
a fake harbor master, that someone can somewhere answer it.
Yeah, that's come up quite a bit, yeah. And it's not, it's the canal corp that owns it, and then it's like, how do we do it? Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely a thing, for sure, yeah. Yeah, good comment, though. Yeah. And it's the same thing, my center, we're gonna be starting a local waterfront revitalization program plan, similar to that lakefront plan, so we're gonna look at Seneca River and like what kind of resources can we put for boaters there and things like that, so, yeah. It'd be cool to have a water tax. Yeah.
At certain times of the year, it'll
It
be
would be,
cool the
right?
rest of
It'd
the
be
year,
awesome.
yes.
It'll be very cold the rest of the
I mean, yeah, the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, I mean, that's an amazing difference having the water tanks.
Yeah.
It's called the Fast Ferry in Rochester.
Yeah.
That didn't pan out, no. Yeah, that was when I was like, that doesn't, I don't think that's gonna happen. You know what, somebody's gotta be thinking that through, like, I'm like, yeah, sure enough. All right, well, thanks for coming. Oh, Ken.
Thank you.
Yes,
A
Mr.
group called
Bush.
World Atlas just released a study of the 11 friendliest towns in upstate New York.
Time
And
out.
2 in Onondaga County got in.
Really?
Skinny Atlas, one of the richest, and Jordan, one of the more modest. But 2 from Onondaga County, and 2 village areas, you know. And so the village concept is really important
It
in
is.
terms of life, quality of life, and all.
Yeah, and Jordan has a lot of historic.
And so, I mean, Baldwinsville is the largest village in the county now, population-wise.
Yep,
And it's just a unique place.
it is.
And somehow, it has to maintain that quality of life. Cramming more people into Baldwinsville, in my view, isn't necessarily the answer, but that's just my personal
Right,
opinion.
Right, right,
The village officials have to make those decisions.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, it's not always, more is not always right.
That's
Sometimes
correct.
it's just better, right?
And less chestnuts, plants in the blue way are much better.
I know. I love that magic wand, so,
And American Mills is here too, that's a
I saw
very
that.
thriving village.
yes. As they're doing great, have you?
Come back, village there.
Absolutely.
You had 3 supervisors here.
Yep,
So I hope this plan honors the home rule concept that we have in New York State,
absolutely.
which Albany seems to just keep eroding year by year.
Try. I know. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job.